So welcome back. Really exciting to engage with all of you over the past 2 days. It's been such an energizing and very fruitful engagement. And again, I'm Radhika Shah, a fellow at the Center at Stanford and at Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs and the SDG Philanthropy Platform. I will be moderating today's Kenya and India dialogues, where we'll hear stories from thought leaders on how these countries are leveraging digital innovation and the power of cross-sectoral, cross-regional collaborations to advance the SDGs in these countries. As I mentioned earlier, to me, the SDGs embody the Gandhian philosophy of respecting the dignity of every human being, of thinking of a relationship to nature as that of a custodian. Earlier, we spent some time in the past 2 days looking a bit at how AI and technology can do harm, how we need to be very careful and cognizant, as well as on the data science front. Today, we'll hear how countries are leveraging the tremendous power of inclusive digital innovation. In a sense, the new electricity of our times, in the words of my friend, Professor Andrew Ng of Stanford, and how this new electricity can accelerate progress on the SDGs. Our first session today is focused on the Kenya story of collaboration and digital innovation to advance the sustainable development goals. I'm delighted to invite my friends, the Kenyan ICT Cabinet Secretary, the Honorable Joseph Mucheru, and Kenya UN Resident Coordinator, who is the head of the UN Kenya, Siddharth Chatterjee, to this dialogue. A format will be that initially we'll hear from them some insights and remarks on the Kenya story, and then we'll have, if time permitting, a little bit of a roundtable and a Q&A dialogue. In this moment of reimagining ourselves and our world, Kenya is a trailblazer. I just wanted to add a bit of my context, having been deeply engaged with Sid, the CS, and Team Kenya. There is a lot for the world to learn from Kenya, and especially from the Kenya SDG Partnership Platform. My colleague, Dr. Tamina Madan, and I have had the honor of hosting our speakers from today's speakers at Berkeley, Stanford, Silicon Valley, and they really energize the community here. It has been exciting to share learnings and start building bridges between these regions, deep bridges to advance the SDGs. We will also hear about the exciting work that Team Kenya is doing on digital infrastructure innovation and leveraging data science for connecting Kenyans to jobs for the future of work. This, of course, is a challenge in every country, but what Kenya is doing there is amazing. If time permits, after the speaker session, we'll have an engaged dialogue on the future of work as well in this age of digital transformation. Now I wanted to invite our speakers. I will introduce them both, and then we'll start with the Cabinet Secretary. The Honorable Kenyan Cabinet Secretary, Joseph Mucheru, the Cabinet Secretary for ICT in Kenya, is part of the Information and Communications Ministry since 2015. He's a former Google Sub-Saharan Africa lead who was based in the Google Nairobi office. The CS is an entrepreneur leader. He co-founded Wananchi Online, where he was CTO and CEO. He attended the Business Executive Program from Stanford University Graduate School of Business. He also holds a BS with honors in economics and computer science from the City University of London. He was awarded the Moran of the Order of the Burning Spear in December 2010 by the President of the Republic of Kenya, and he's a member of the African Leadership Network. He indeed is a new age leader of our times, the kind we need. It's also an honor to introduce the inspiring Siddharth Chatterjee, a dear friend. Sid is the UN Resident Coordinator for Kenya. As I mentioned earlier, the head of United Nations Kenya, all the UN efforts in Kenya. Sid has held several key roles at various UN agencies over the years and served in some of the most fragile regions in the world. He is a Special Forces veteran of the Indian Army. Sid is a feminist humanitarian, a true champion for the rights of the vulnerable, women, and anyone who needs help around the world. He's a fun half-marathon runner who blogs at Reuters and IPS. He's passionate about making a difference in the lives of the most vulnerable And he and I share a passion, and all of us, I think, for respecting the dignity of each and every human being in the world. He's a Princeton alum and a powerful agent of change and reform within the UN system and beyond. We will start by hearing some insights from CS Mucheru. I know the CS was going to join us in a minute. CS Manwa, is CS online yet?
I am, if you can hear me. Maybe it's a bit dark, but I'm online. I can see you.
Wonderful. We can hear you. I just introduced you and Sid. CS, so good to reconnect. And thank you again for taking the time. And we're excited to have two kind of the new age leaders from the UN and from the government today with us. Welcome, CS. Over to you to share some insights on the Kenya story.
So, Radhika, if you allow me, I just wanted to add a few words more to introduce the CS properly. Is that, ladies and gentlemen, Cabinet Secretary Joe Mucheru, indeed, he represents what the new age leadership actually looks like. He represents the age profile of that kind of new age leadership. He represents what Kenya is aspiring to into the future. So it's quite incredible that the president of this country actually had a vision of bringing in a team of ministers around him to really look at Kenya's development from the true lens of how it can be made dynamic, involving everything that can actually accelerate growth. And, you know, for me, it's a true privilege that I'm actually serving in this country, first as the UN resident coordinator, but with a partner like Cabinet Secretary Joe Mucheru. Joe Mucheru, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Sid and Radhika, for the introductions. I apologize, I'm not at my office. I'm actually out in the field, and I was given some assignment by the boss. But this was an important event to attend, and I really wanted to make sure that we are together. Let me say that, as a country, we've been going through the challenges that COVID-19 has set. And as you know, this has come at a time when, as a country, we've been working very hard to implement the president's agenda of, having digital innovation and ensuring that, for us, because jobs are one of the key challenges that we have, that we are able to create as many job opportunities for our young people as possible. So my responsibility as the minister in charge of ICT falls squarely in the vision that the president has of ensuring that as a country we go digital and that we put in all the required infrastructure policies to ensure that this works. COVID-19 has made it easier, I would say, to some degree, and really it shows that the president was even ahead in ensuring that the many infrastructure investments that we put in place as a country, as well as ensuring, sorry, this is, oops, I apologize for that completely. I hope you can see me.
Yes, we can see you and hear you.
Yes. So thank you very much, and apologies for that. So in 2018, we had a meeting with the AmCham, and this was a meeting at Strathmore that the president, attended. And in that meeting, Sid was also present, and really it was really clear to the country that our president is committed to the digital agenda and development that is there. And we began a process of partnering also with the global community to ensure that as a country, we're not left behind. One of the key challenges of being able to grow the digital economy is that you must do this in partnership not only with the academia, but also with the business community. And the president ensured that it was clear for us that we must work hand in hand with all these partners to ensure that we move forward. We were not sure and clear about COVID-19, but as we look now 2 years later, when COVID-19 came in, the operations in the country have really now been made stronger because we invested heavily in digital. So for example, we invested in fiber, we invested in 4G, and even now we're looking at areas like 5G, and in ensuring that everyone in the country has access to the connectivity. By doing so, we were able to see that during COVID, businesses continued to meet. We as government and cabinet, and even regionally, our presidents were meeting together using their video conferencing, just as we're doing today. And the fact that we had good connectivity infrastructure made that possible. The need for the devices and the demand that was there increased significantly. The fact that we had gone through like the president's digital literacy program, as well as the presidential internship, where we are able to get interns to come in, it was part of the reskilling, ensuring that within government, where we did not have enough skilled manpower, that was actually put in place. And so we were able to be everywhere within the country. And as a result, the platforms that we set up, whether it is the use of the existing social media platforms or the mobile money platforms that we put on, e-citizen and other key platforms that we've been using as a country, that we have teams that develop these platforms. We have teams that also provide the necessary customer service in the country. And that really has worked. So it has made it possible with these skills for us to ensure that the future of work is digital, that the government becomes more efficient, that we create a lot more transparency, openness, key things that within the government are key as we give services to our citizens, ensuring that we have the transparency. And as a result, it creates the trust within government, trust with the partners that we have who are investing in the country, investing in the government, and even in our staff within the government, knowing that they have the right skills and that they can now move to the next level. So the work in public service is now being delivered a lot more efficiently. You can apply for your visa from overseas. You can be able to apply for passports locally, all this using the electronic method that we put in place. So it is our intention, and we have that in the new ICT policy, that we're going to make some of the specific digital skills compulsory in schools so that our children are future-proofed. Many of them are already on, using digital platforms, but we want to ensure that that is part of their everyday learning. So the curriculum, competency-based curriculum that has been introduced in the country is primarily to ensure that we're moving forward in that direction. We're investing a lot in e-commerce and ensuring that our goods and services are able to be sold not just locally by creating a local digital economy, but that we're able to, push the same now regionally and internationally, as we as a country are part of it, and that is allowing us to ensure that our staff, our citizens are all engaged in all the different countries around the world, whether it is physically going to those countries or they are using technology to get there. These are things that we're putting in place. So we have different programs that really will take advantage of the Smart Africa initiative, as of 150 million, 30 African countries have come together in market, removing roaming, the countries. So these are key things that
CS, I think you have a connectivity issue. If you could just recheck your connection.
We're putting in place, and we want to adopt. We ensure that our companies will continue also to scale and scale the many. Hello. Can you hear
yes,
me?
you're back, but we lost you in between.
Just for 45 seconds, we lost you. Yes, before that, it was very clear.
Okay, I apologize for that. As I said, I'm out in the field. We're testing our 4G services, so my apologies. But what I was saying is that in taking advantage of the Smart Africa, where we are now consolidating the African market, the continental free trade area that we are working on, will ensure that we have 1.3 billion Africans now in the market, and majority of them young. And so this requires serious partnerships that we will take with the private with the United Nations, where
we lost you again for a
the Silicon Valley. We have other plans that we want to put in place. I'm gone again. Apologies.
Yes, it did happen. Yeah. Go ahead, Sid.
No, we just lost you for a second, CS, a few seconds. Maybe it's just that.
If connectivity is a problem, sometimes it helps stopping video and just going audio.
Maybe
CS, do you want to try? Yeah, CS, do you want to try turning off video and just doing audio? Maybe that will help.
We can't hear you now, CS, at all. So yeah, maybe if video stopping helps, we could try it. We see you there without the video, CS, but we can't hear you right now.
Okay, I've tried to change the network. I don't know if that is any clearer. Is that any clearer?
It's still
Do you want to try and turn off your video?
It might make the audio better if you turn off the video, perhaps, because now the quality has degraded quite a bit overall.
So I have turned off the video. I don't know if that is any clearer.
No, we still can't hear you, CS. Luckily, we could hear you very clearly for the first 10 minutes or so, but now it's really almost gone. Manwa, are you on the line, Manwa? Do we know how much time the CS has? If he has a bit more time, perhaps we could take some questions in the chat for Sid and the CS while we're looking at the connectivity issues. If anyone has questions, please do type them into the chat. And Sid and the CS are a deeply connected team, so Sid could start answering some of those questions. So invite you to engage.
So it's still not clear, yeah?
No. Well, the last sentence we could hear. Try speaking, CS, and let's see if it gets any better.
Hello, Siddharth. Radhika, I think based on what the CS is probably is having some connectivity challenges because he's out in the field. We'll probably just have to give him some moments for him to probably get to a place where he's got better connectivity, and maybe we can continue the.
Yeah, then should we, maybe there is a question. Let me read that question and hand that to Sid and, hello?
As we wait for.
Yeah, we can't hear the CS. So I agree with Manwa that let's wait till the CS is in a better connectivity place and we take the question first. And then maybe we have Sid share some remarks if the CS still having challenges. So there's a couple of questions.
Back.
Yeah, I am going to read out the questions in the chat. So the one question from Talepo Molapo to everyone is there information available on the Kenya Digital Literacy Program? And the second question is from Brian Omwenga to everyone. On the competency-based curriculum, are there any partnerships, unification on competency unification with other countries in the world to ensure that Kenyan workers will be marketable beyond Kenyan borders? Sid, do you want to take these questions until we wait a few minutes? Or
sure, but I'm just checking. I can see that Jane Munga from the CS's office is there. So if in case Jane wants to start off on it.
Yeah. Jane, welcome. And over to you if you want to react to these questions. And you can also see them in the chat.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's evening where I am. And thank you, Radhika, for this session. I guess I can take the ones that I can as we wait.
Sorry to jump in, would you introduce yourself and your role in as well?
No problem, I'll do that. So my name is Jane Munga. I work at the Cabinet Secretary's office as an advisor, and I also double up at the National Communications Secretariat as a policy advisor and an economic expert. So we came to the US under the SDG Extension Lab. So we've worked very closely with the UN to see how we can drive partnerships to improve young people's employability and also the opportunities out there. And apologies, I also joined late, but can go ahead and try and get the first question on DLP as we wait for the Cabinet Secretary to come back on. So yes, we do have information on the Digital Literacy Program. It has been rolled out in conjunction with our ministry and the Ministry of Education. The Digital Literacy Program is an initiative by the government of Kenya, especially through the Jubilee government, the current government, to ensure that young people are enabled to get to the 21st century skills. So we are trying to ensure that all our learners, especially those coming in through the CBC, which is now being rolled out to the 4th year, that they are also accessing education through the digital platforms. We started by ensuring that they have access to a device, and also they have access to internet. And thirdly, there's also access to content. So the three of these work together concurrently. And also we've had to go through a lot of teacher training to ensure that through the competency-based curriculum, teachers are also using this platform to enhance the learning experience. We've had a lot of good results for this. And one of the actually interesting facts that we've seen is the children or the learners run out of the content even before they go to class. They're very eager. So by the time they're in class, they've even gone through different modules where the teacher has not reached. So it's to show that we just have young learners who are really, really interested in learning this. So if this is being run and championed, let me know when the CS comes back. I would gladly leave the floor to him. But this is being done through our ministry, and we are now looking, because of the COVID response, we're also trying to see how to ensure that this is expanded to all the grades. So we are trying to fast track that, and by connecting all our schools with internet. We've started to roll out with grade 4 and standard 8 going back to school, coming later this month. But we are beginning to see the call for more curriculum that is being done digitally. So these are some of the things we've done with partnership with the UN. Sid knows about the Giga project. That team has come strongly on board, and they are going to help us map out all of Kenya, and also to ensure that every child is connected to the internet, and also the content is being beefed up. So I think that answers the first question, and over back to you, Radhika. I don't remember what the second question was.
It's on the chat. There's 2 more questions. I'm going to again read them for you and Sid. And how do you see the future of work in job creation in Kenya? That's from Rosemary Okello Olale, who's actually from Kenyan University, I believe. And then again, from someone from Kenya, Martin, what are the specific opportunities for SMEs in the Kenya-US FTA and the CFTA when viewed in the context of the digital economy, especially in the context of the Smart Africa initiative? What lessons does the US-Japan digital trade agreement offer for Kenya? I will request quick answers to this because I wanted to make sure also we are on, since we're on a tight time track, that we get to Sid's remarks. So maybe quick reactions to these, and then Sid, if that makes sense, maybe we start with your remarks and then come back to the CS if the connectivity works. So Jane.
Can you hear me, Radhika?
Yeah.
Am I clear or you still can't hear me?
We can hear you. Welcome back, CS. We can hear you clearly.
Thank you very much.
Over to
And
you.
I've also had the questions, so I'll try and respond to those. So I was saying that for us, one of the key things as a government is that in order for us to be able to take full advantage of digital, we must be able to have the right partnerships. And we've been working very closely with SEED on the SDG Accelerator Lab. That is with the UNDP. We're working together with academia and many different organizations so that we can be able to grow the digital skills, ensuring that we are patenting many of our innovations that are coming through, and ensuring that we're able to take advantage of the larger market that we now have. The FTA we're looking at with the United States of America and something similar even with the UK primarily helps the many businesses that want to come and invest in Kenya. They want to invest in Africa, and they have challenges of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which would hold the CEOs personally responsible if their companies were involved in corruption, in which case we have seen less investment coming into the country. With an FTA coming into place, then Africa or Kenya becomes, like a state in the US. And this is not political, but this is just looking at the legal status, in which case the companies can then be able to invest as though they're investing in the US. And they would not be punished if their employees misbehaved. And at the same time, this is something we're building even with the United Nations family to ensure that companies that are coming, we're vetting different projects and we're being able to encourage the investors to come in. And when they invest, they know that they have the right partners who they're working with. And should there be a problem, they can still point fingers at the government, the UN, the academic institutions that were involved in ensuring that we're moving forward. So it's our intention to continue providing the necessary training. It's not only the digital skills, it is also training on the business skills. How do you capitalize on intellectual property that you've developed? How do you market? How do you ensure you're being able to reach the total market? Taking advantage of the different new technologies, including use of the artificial intelligence, human intelligence, and the many different opportunities that are presented. So I would say one of our key objectives is to ensure that we have the right partners, the right partnerships, and that we have peer networks that we work alongside. Two, we are ensuring that we have the right laws and the right policies in place so that we protect investment, we protect privacy and data, we protect the intellectual property of companies, and this will ensure that companies can invest with confidence, that they have a court process that they can use should there be need for adjudication. We're investing in the necessary infrastructure so that, if you want to test 5G and 5G applications, that we will have that in place. And we've created sufficient competition in the market to ensure that that is going to be available and is available in the country. So many of these aspects that we're putting on and ensuring that we're doing this now across the continent. Kenya is leading in the Smart Africa Alliance, the digital economy blueprint. We launched this in Kigali with our president, and this so far is working well across the continent. And if we can aggregate the markets, especially with technology, we will see a lot of growth. Finally, let me say that because of the young people that we have, and the skills that they are able to have and the geography that we have as a country, we're being able to provide a lot of work and skills across. We're exporting to different markets. We're exporting, for instance, for transcription, for design, for artificial intelligence, data collection and labeling, and so on. So this is an area that is growing, and we're very happy that we have got great partners. MasterCard Foundation, for example, is really helping us put up centers where we can do the training and provide the various necessary infrastructure. So I would say, in summary, that's where we are, and I apologize that the network did not work as I had hoped. It means there's some area of improvement also on our end in Kenya, especially on the mobile connectivity. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Radhika.
Thank you, CS, for sharing those inspiring insights. And we overcame the tech challenges, and this was extremely clear. We could hear you very clearly, and thank you for those great insights. There is one more question in case you want to touch on it. Otherwise, Sid could. Matthias, the member from the Skills Alliance and a new governance initiative, one of the co-conveners has asked that, do we have results and metrics on how the Skills and Jobs platform has helped Kenyan youth find a job? I know it's still early days, and for me, it's been very exciting, the work around the jobs platform and your thinking and vision that you shared here at Google and other places. And this is something that would be good to get both of your perspectives. Perhaps if you're going to be there, CS, we can come back to it after Sid shares some remarks. But if, since your connectivity is working now, if you have any quick reactions, we'll take them now while we can hear you clearly.
Thank you very much. I think that's an extremely good question. So let me say that one of the challenges of the digital economy is that many of the young people do not want to be taxed. And because they don't want to be taxed and they feel that they are earning money and the government should not be engaged, getting the real statistics from them has been interesting and challenging. But so far, we've been able to establish that in Kenya, we have now over 700,000 people working online. This is done by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. They've been able to show that this number of people are working, and this is growing at more than 20% month on month. What is good about this is that we put a policy in place, the president approved this, where there's a flat taxation of $100 that they would pay, but the $100 would go back directly into the digital economy scaling program, the Ajira program, where they can now be able to use that for many and various services that they have. And whether they earn $10 million or they earn $1 million or $100,000, it's a flat rate of $100 a year for taxation. So we hope this will help in the process of acquiring the right statistics, the metrics. We intend to have on an annual basis 1 million young people getting onto the digital jobs. We have recently begun a program with the judiciary where we are now transcribing the proceedings in the judiciary. And we record the proceedings, we pass on that information to the transcribers, and by morning we've given the full report to the magistrates and the judges. So that's already working, where government itself is begun the digitization process and creating work. Similarly, we're doing that with the Ministry of Lands in ensuring that the land records are put into, blockchain databases where it's immutable, and you can come and be sure what you own is what you own, and that's what's on record. And again, creating work, creating the skills that are needed for digitization, for mapping the country. And so many of these things are currently happening, including setting up the occurrence book, a digital occurrence book for all the police in the country, so that they can record electronically any crimes, and that is available. The number that comes from the occurrence book is what goes and is passed on as the file within the judiciary. That's the same file is used all the way. So a lot of work going on, and we are hopeful that we'll be able to really improve on that. Thank you.
Thank you, CS. And again, while on the line, I want to just mention that we'll be talking more about this later after Sid's talk. But we are very excited in this collaboration between the Stanford University and the Sorbonne, and with people joining from all over the world. We have a truly global community today in the summit. We are launching or announcing the launch of a study group, international study group, focused on the future of jobs as we transition into the digital era. And we will be having some former European members of parliament joining, top academics from Silicon Valley. One of the top computer science minds at Stanford has said yes to join. And we are looking to initially look at 2-3 countries, and we are thinking of Kenya as one of our first case studies to look at, considering the leading trailblazing work you all have been doing. And we'll be thrilled to invite you and Sid to join the study group, and we'll follow up later, but I wanted to announce that we are launching this today. And we'll be hearing from, this will be anchored within the Skills Alliance, which is an initiative of a new governance that Matthias de Beerbrel leads. And he'll be talking to us about the amazing work that group is doing. And I think the possibilities of synergies are amazing. And then Sharon Jorgensen, co-convener, will also be pulling in Denmark as a country. So we will be looking at Denmark, France, Kenya, we are hoping, and Ghana. And then, of course, over time, India and many other countries. But we are excited. The kind of the work that Kenya is doing is the one that has inspired me to even think of forming a study group where there is so many learnings that could be shared. And so thank you again for kind of the trailblazing work that Kenya has been doing and the deep partnership between the UN and the government. Thank you again, CS Muchero. Sid, without further ado,
thank you so much.
Thank you again, CS.
So I was saying thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. And yeah, I would need to drop now, but I really appreciate for the opportunity to speak. So thank you again.
Thank you, the CS, in spite of being in the field and the tech challenges, I've seen you always prevail, kind of overcome all the challenges. So thank you for joining us. It means a lot to us. And thank you for answering the questions as well. Sid, over to you. Welcome. Sid is one of the most inspiring leaders in the UN and a true trailblazer as well in terms of the transformative leadership we need and also the reforms we need, whether it be in the UN or in the world right now. And for me, hearing him speak about the SDGs has been a key factor in me becoming such a huge champion of the SDGs in Silicon Valley. Over to you, Sid. Again, Sid is the resident coordinator and head of the United Nations in Kenya and has had amazing key roles. I introduced him earlier, so I won't do that again. But very unusual background as well, very entrepreneurial mindset. Over to you, Sid.
Thank you so much, Radhika. And first of all, thank you in particular and Dr. Tamina Madan for having been such an important champion, as well as our pro bono advisors in the Silicon Valley to this entire initiative. And the reason we've got so far is in large measure thanks to both of you and the support that you have given us. So, I think for your audience, it would also be very interesting to understand Kenya from a demographic and geography point of view. And let me start with demography, because I think demography will set the tone of what the potential of Africa is. Back in 1956, Kenya's population was the same as Sweden, 7 million. Today, Sweden is 10.9 million. Kenya is 46.7 million. The total fertility rates at a national average of about 4. So with that in mind, we are going to see the population grow to about 65 million by 2030 and close to about 100 million by 2050. If you look at the ecosystem of Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Sudan, just these countries together, by 2050 would have a population of close to 700 million. Africa will have a population of about 2.3 billion, of which about 850 million will be young people. With a few macroeconomic adjustments, Kenya was already on that route. Ethiopia was on that route. South Africa was on that route. Tanzania, Uganda. COVID has been an interruption, but I don't see it as a major interruption because here is an opportunity to reimagine and resurrect, should I call it the fourth industrial revolution, which stands really, to be plugged into this whole ecosystem. And if I just look at those macroeconomic adjustments, these are countries which will have double-digit economic growth. So what do they offer? They offer a neighborhood of consumers, and they also offer a neighborhood of producers. They are a neighborhood of very, very young people, whereas all of the United States of America, all the way to Canada, Europe, the Asian tigers are what you call a demographic echo, or they are aging. whereas you're looking at a country with a median age of 18, whereas the median age of Sweden, for example, is 47. So it's an exciting time. And as you can see that Kenya, despite the fact that it got independence in 1963, it has really moved ahead in terms of investing in its human capital, regardless of all the stories that you hear around the world that, you know, African nations are corrupt and all that. Let me tell you, I've been serving in this country for the last 6 years, and the transformation that I have seen in terms of leapfrogging its development agenda, I mean, could potentially be a blueprint for the success of many other countries, including my own, where I come from, which is India. And what is it that makes Kenya so special? First of all, you know, they were amongst the first African countries to actually embrace the principle of universal access to education and made free primary education, you know, absolutely accessible. A huge investment in its human capital. And therefore, what it did was from the late 80s into the 90s, it started throwing up a new generation of young people that were much better with the 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's an English-speaking country, thanks to the, having been a colony of the British. But above all that, it's a hotbed of innovation. I mean, every corner of Kenya has some kind of innovation which is going on the other. And that's why today Kenya stands as the second biggest cashless transaction country in the world, followed by after Sweden. The M-Pesa system, which came into existence in about 2007, 2008, is something countries like in the United States and Europe and India are trying to catch up on how advanced this kind of cashless transaction are. And essentially what it did was at one go allowed people to bank their incomes, because people don't have access to banks. You know, you don't have a bank everywhere. Despite the fact that Kenya has made huge progress, the reality is that in this ecosystem, people can actually save, they can transact, and this itself can actually become a harbinger of better tax revenue generation, more democracy in the tax revenue generation, and the potentials are unlimited. So combine that with this whole concept of artificial intelligence that can really take this to an entire whole new network will change. The fact is that today, the CS was actually in a very remote place and was still able to connect. And these are really, really remote places. The reality is recently Kenya actually hosted a meeting of about 5,000 odd people on Zoom. And actually all 5,000 were up there from the remotest parts of Kenya to the US, to Japan, to everywhere. And the whole conversation was about young people. And we had a very similar conversation, which was undertaken by New York and you know, very high-tech gadgetry. And that whole conversation that we had for 3 hours went down completely uninterrupted. And the New York one, suddenly, you know, there was something went wrong, and within half an hour, it just fell off the curve. So it just goes to show that there are potential opportunities here, and those potential opportunities will really be where the new consumers are. And this is where the new Marshall Plan of employment needs to take place. And why am I talking about a Marshall Plan of employment? That Marshall Plan should not be the Marshall Plan of the post-Second World War, which was driven by the United States. And what did it do with Europe? It did 3 things. Number one, it took Europe out of poverty. Number 2, it created a whole new market. Number 3, it created a whole group of allies. And that itself then became the underbelly for the creation of the European Union. Now, Africa has very similar ambition, in which Kenya is playing a very important leadership role. And that is the Africa Free Trade Area. I know that that's a question which has been put up there. Just imagine that if we can get a public-private partnership right, which is able to span borders and cross artificial barriers, where all this is broken down and Africa starts looking like the new European Union. Imagine what that means in terms of markets, in terms of resources, in terms of human capital. The potential is unlimited. And why am I saying this? I want to take you back to a story of Unilever when they came to India in 1908. If you recall, India was very poor then. It was a colony of the British. You know, it was going through severe hardships. But at the same time, Unilever decided to open a factory in India. That time, India's population may have been between 152 to 200 million people. By 2018, you know, in 100 years, it was found that out of every 3 Indians, 2 were using some form of a Unilever product. And that just goes to show you how the market got capitalized by Unilever, which also calls itself Hindustan Lever in India. And what that meant, now imagine what took Unilever 100 years has now shrunk to 5-6 years because of social media, because of technology, that in the flip of a finger, you can actually sell your car to people from San Francisco to people in Dubai. So it's just that. So it just goes to show that today, where we are in terms of really harnessing big data technology and innovation is where this change is happening. And what Kenya is doing is precisely that. I'll give you another example. We undertook an initiative, the UN system with the government of Kenya, with 6 companies: Merck, GlaxoSmithKline, Safaricom, Huawei, Kenya Healthcare Federation, and Philips. This partnership went into 6 of the most remote counties of Kenya in the year 2015 and decided to look at the high maternal mortality ratios in these counties. It was one of the most unusual partnerships of private sector and the UN system and the government. In a matter of 3 years, we were able to not only reduce maternal mortality ratios in these counties, which were considered intractable because of many traditional harmful practices, the scourge of cross-border terror attacks, and simply because of the absence of good human capital. But what technology and innovation allowed us to do, and a better understanding of big data, was we were able to leapfrog a lot of those results. And let me tell you, and I want to put this into context, what took us 3 years in India or Nigeria or many other parts of the world could take anywhere from 10 to 15 years. Now, that's the potential that I'm talking about. So when you're looking at Kenya's Big 4 development agenda, and which is about universal health coverage, it's about agriculture and food security, it's about affordable housing and manufacturing. If I just were to just focus on these 4, look at universal health coverage. I mean, today, COVID-19 has totally reminded us that without universal health coverage, which covers the entire globe and leaves no one behind, we are as weak as the weakest link there. So quite clearly, a virus that could have mutated in the West can come to the East in a matter of hours and vice versa. And there's no way. There is, today the virus has penetrated the sanctity of the White House or 10 Downing Street. It just goes to show that there is no one who's free of the virus. But what does that mean also in terms of our own preparedness, in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of early surveillance system, in terms of using robust technological means? And this is what I'm talking about in universal health coverage. If we can immunize every child, it's not impossible to do it. We can now fly in drones and get it done. We can train an army of community health workers who are tech savvy and connected to the Google Loon balloons, which, as you know, Cabinet Secretary Mucheru actually launched it very recently so that we could start connecting the remotest counties with technology. We will be able to use all the elements that involve preventative health. What has COVID-19 also reminded us? That simple basic hygiene sometimes got lost, and simple things like hand washing and respiratory etiquette and keeping a physical distance and covering our faces good enough to actually flatten the virus. And this is probably what is going to come back. In fact, the healthcare business in Africa is likely to grow to $300 to $400 billion. Keep in mind, food and health will constantly be consumed. But just imagine that if we can actually bring down costs, achieve economies of scale, that's where the return of investment is going to be. Everybody pays, whether it's through a taxation system or individuals invest in their health outcomes, everybody pays. But technology is already getting us to places where preventative health could be made much more robust. So we don't have to go through a current regression in our entire economy, which rivals that of the Great Depression of the 1930s. Who would have thought that this was ever possible? When they said that, too big to fail. I mean, today the big have started to fail. They've just started coming down like a deck of cards because the consumers are not there, because the consumers have been left impoverished by the absence of jobs and huge unemployment. So it's clear that if technology, innovation, big data, the public-private sector, the UN, we all come together and recreate this new genre of multilateralism. That is where it grew, where all of you are sitting, in particularly those in the Silicon Valley, saw the growth of multilateralism, post the Second World War. And here is where the opportunity really lies to recreate that entire environment. So earlier this year, as CS Mucheru was saying, we actually did a visit to the Silicon Valley and got into this partnership where we want to twin the Silicon Valley with the Silicon Savannah. Because why? Geography now comes into consideration. First of all, Kenya is beautifully located in terms of geography. It's got the oceans, it's got the mountains, it's got the infrastructure. It's got several countries that it borders: Somalia, Uganda, Ethiopia, South Sudan. So just imagine that if we were to be able to apply this, not just as a Kenyan market, which currently is 46.7 million, but the entire ecosystem. Now that makes huge sense for this sort of a partnership, because we don't want this partnership to be one of charity. We want this partnership to be one of precisely that win-win opportunities. The CS spoke about the SDG Accelerator Lab. So we are looking at how do we look at an issue like agriculture and recreate that opportunity that we did in India with the Green Revolution in the late 60s. I don't know how many of you know it, but it was Lyndon Johnson that initiated the Green Revolution in India, and the word Green Revolution was that time coined by the head of USAID then in 1967, and they sent a man called Lester Brown. Probably many of you would know about him, and he looked at what would it take to invest in India to make India food secure. Today, India with 1.3 billion people is actually food secure. What took India 30, 40 years can now be done in 5 to 6 years. For a fact, in a country like China, agriculture from the 1980s to 2010 was able to take people out of poverty from 36% to 2%. Now that is where the agricultural revolution is going to be. It's the entire value chain. It's not just planting the seeds. It's the whole value chain from sericulture and all that. Let's take affordable housing. Now, Kenya has a shortfall of 2 million affordable houses. That's what it needs in order to cater for that basic dignity for people. Can we not look at massive scale industrialization of housing through 3D printed technology, through prefabricated structures, and get people to embrace an alternate reality of this sort of living? Because Kenya also wants to fast track its forest coverage. So if we go through the traditional building modes, we will be continuously cutting down more and more forests in order to build these homes. Whereas if we were to now embrace new technologies to be able to do that, that's where it's going to be. Look at manufacturing. I mean, the green economy is set here. The blue economy is set here. And this gives you huge market access into the rest of Africa simply because of the geographical location of this country. So, this is for the SDGs, this is the start of the last 10 years, and it has to be a sprint. But that sprint will not be achieved if we were to adapt yesterday's approaches to today's and tomorrow's problems. Today's reality is the Silicon Valley where you sit, where you have disrupted, where you've changed the whole ecosystem of people's lives. That is what needs to happen here. And this is where the new resources and mobilization and the change in humanity will happen. Those very companies which are failing today need markets. It is clear that as there are deeper impoverishments, as people fall off the employment charts, they are less able to consume. As a result, whether it's tourism or it's a restaurant business or it's the aircraft business, it's just the whole ecosystem which has started to collapse. Just a few, perhaps more of the technology company, which maybe still be making a profit, but the reality is that the inequality starts growing. And COVID-19 it's been like a bolt of lightning. It kind of in that it showed the contours of inequality which came up. So quite clearly, what we are also seeing is a movement and a motion of people which are getting more and more angry and just frustrated by this new, of a reality which has now come home to roost. Imagine in Africa with this huge youth population. I mean, Kenya alone needs to create 1 million jobs a year. Africa needs to create 10 to 12 million jobs a year. This is the demographic reality. Imagine if we can create those jobs here, you will have less and less people wanting to head to the West. Nobody wants to leave their homes. But at the same time, an aging West can take advantage of a young, versatile human capital, which can advance health systems and opportunities, which comes through connectivity. So Kenya is actually sitting very well poised to embrace that fourth industrial revolution and really make this move in this whole new context. So the thing is that if we look at where Africa sits, it's at the cusp of what you would call a demographic dividend. But that window of the demographic dividend is narrow, just as it was narrow for the US, just as it was narrow for the West, just as it was narrow for the Asian tigers. The reality is that all these countries, while they've grown old, they've grown rich. It's Africa's turn now. As they start to go progress, they must also get rich before they get old. And that will come through a resolute partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid, for that very inspiring talk and energizing as always, and such a visionary kind of perspective on Kenya, Africa, and the new age that we are transitioning into. There is one question for you, question that also is of very high interest to me. I'm going to read it from Martin. What concrete role can universities play in a triple helix of government, industry, and academia to promote digital rights through the SDGs and the Ruggie framework? Can you think of immediate practical examples in AI or robotics?
You know, universities become the hotbed of that relationship. They become, should I say, the glue that brings academia together, because we need a scientific temperament and an academic rigor to back up good social policy. One of the reasons that in later years of my life that I decided to stop working and go back to school, simply because I must admit I had a deep sense of inadequacy and intellectual inadequacy, which prompted me to go back to school and rewire myself. I could have gone anywhere else, but I chose a university for the simple reason that is where that rewiring really happens. Let me give you another very classic example. If you look at the growth of South Korea and you look at the growth of, let's say, Africa, I wrote a piece about how Kenya can be the future South Korea. But you know, there was one fundamental difference, which I only saw, I realized it in a Fareed Zakaria show on GPS, when he said that the United States of America invested $60 billion between 1950 and 1980 in Africa. The United States invested $60 billion between 1950 and 1980 in South Korea, which was, you know, loans and grants and all that. It took a large number of South Korean, it's a highly meritocratic society, to the best universities, gave them the best exposure to medicine and engineering and all that. And look at where South Korea got to. This is precisely the kind of relationships that we will need to build in Africa. So we want to see a Stanford in Africa, a Princeton in Africa, a Harvard in Africa, not trying to get them all to the West, bring the universities here, because that is how the universities will also prosper. But what you're doing is also investing in that capital. In the space of artificial intelligence, that is where universities such as Stanford or UC Berkeley and many others could really come in. And imagine if you could actually twin universities here in Kenya or in Africa with many of the universities in the US. Now that's where those games will start to change. Therefore, the universities will become the bedrock of the fourth industrial revolution and actually have to become a partner in that new ecosystem that I'm talking about, the renaissance or the resurrection of the new form of multilateralism. Over to you.
Thank you, Sid. There's a couple more questions. I'll request quick response because we have the India roundtable and it's pretty late in India. So while I would have loved to continue this dialogue, quick response to these questions, and then we'll transition to India. Very inspiring, and it's on the chat, so you can see them as well, Sid, if that's helpful. From Rosemary Okela from Kenya, very inspiring presentation, Sid. Are laws, regulations needed for Kenya and Africa to realize the full potential in the digital economy? And are such laws being adopted already is one question. The next one from Armstrong. How has Kenya managed to overcome cultural hurdles that contribute to bureaucracy and lack of synergy among different government agencies and the private sector? Is there an overarching enabling framework for digital innovation that can be shared? Then from Tapelo Molapo. Do you think there is a case for continental collaboration some of the key catalytic initiatives instead of setting them up at country level. Absolutely, yes, Apollo. That's kind of what we've been doing with the Silicon Valley Kenya collaboration. I posted an article on that collaboration on the chat. And we have many more questions. I'm going to let you scan them, Sid, in the spirit of respecting the Team Kenya's time, and respond to whichever makes sense. And the others will be happy to follow up later, only to respect the Team India who are on standby, and it's pretty late in the night. So I'll let you scan and respond to whichever ones in 5 minutes or so, Sid, and then we'll wrap.
Look, I will just say one thing, because I really want my colleague Arif to just briefly come in as well, who's been kind of running our SDG platform. What I do want to say is it's work in progress, and traditional bureaucratic mindsets take time to change. And that is why, that's why I'm talking about a renaissance. We will, what COVID-19 has done is to make us pause. I mean, today, I've just been, before I was speaking to all of you, I was actually speaking to 2 or 3 other countries in the Middle East, and prior to that, Europe. And today I can actually switch continents simply because of the technology which is available here. In Kenya, the very fact that today I can have such clear conversation with you is thanks to the digital footprint that this country is actually creating. It's quite fascinating how well connected it is, but it is still unequal. There are still regulatory frameworks that they are trying to work on, and those things are work in progress. The public-private partnership part is the place where the president himself has decided he's going to have a lot of energy that he wants to invest in, because you want to also make it an investor-friendly country that people can come in, both intellectual investment, financial investment, and any other, and make sure, and as the CS was mentioning, that there is security at there. And that security is where the UN is really coming in and saying, listen, we are the best de-riskers that are sitting with the government and the private sector and with academia and everybody else. We may not be able to de-risk by a huge amount of financial resources, but we de-risk through a moral presence. We de-risk by convening, connecting, catalyzing, making all that happen. The beauty is that in a country like Kenya, it could have been very easy for Kenya to say, no, we don't need the UN, we'll just do it ourselves. They find it comfortable to have a bridge, and that bridge is going to be what is going to cement it. And this is how we will see the new wave of change that will start to happen. And frankly, if we can get it right in Kenya, we have a blueprint for the rest of Africa. So Arif, do you want to add anything quickly before Radhika needs to go?
And I just want to mention again that Arif Neki is, and thank you, Sid, there is comments flowing in that people love the presentation, very inspired. And thank you for you and the CS. And thank you again for this inspiring talk. I just wanted to mention that Arif Neki is a leader as well in the philanthropy space, and heads the SDG partnership platform in Kenya, and a colleague. And Arif, welcome. And only because we are late into the India panel, I'll request take a couple of minutes to react to some of the questions, or just share about the platform, whatever you'd like to do. Arif, welcome.
No, thank you, Radhika, and thank you, Sid. And I'll be very brief.
I wanted to request we all mute our.
I just make a couple of points. I think the question was around, what are the cultural barriers and how are you able to get multi-stakeholder partners together? And I think the experience we had in Kenya points to a few lessons learned. I think one of the lessons was that we really need to align incentives. We need to make sure that there's a shared value proposition, that if you bring in private sector, you bring in philanthropy, you bring in blended finance partners, you bring in multilateral agencies like the UN, you bring in government. What you're doing is you're trying to create something that goes beyond just the love of God, compassion, and philanthropy. You're trying to align enlightened self-interest, which is really a win-win to make sure that it sustains longer-term partnerships that go beyond transactional partnerships. The second thing I think is going to understand much more the fact that we need systems influence at scale. I think gone are the days we need pilotitis, when we need little puffs of excellence in a sea of deprivation. Because even with 6 to 7% GDP growth rates in its heyday in Kenya, we found 35% of Kenyans below the poverty line. We need inclusive economic growth. We don't need simply GDP numbers that don't that essentially leave people behind. And thirdly, I'll just say that we need to also appreciate the role of government in terms of leadership. We need to understand that private sector is the engine of growth, but unbridled private sector actually requires this kind of ecosystem in order that it can sustain its own future markets. And we're very clear now with the Green Compact, with the climate change effects, that private sector companies are very quickly moving into ESG practices far more rapidly than they did before COVID, because their own existence in the future is underwritten by the kinds of consumer behavior that will be expected from young consumers in future. So overall, I think that there's a greater appreciation of diversity, the strength of pluralism, the strength of multi-stakeholder partnerships. And really the one saying that we use often is let's leave our egos, logos, and silos behind, and let's converge for impact. And I think that's where a multilateral partner like the UN can play a role as a neutral broker. Thank you.
Thank you, Arif. And I must mention that because Arif touched on pluralism, Arif used to head the Aga Khan Foundation offices in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda. And the Aga Khan spirit is truly, truly with the beauty in pluralism. And that's something we so need in the world right now. Your talk reminded me of that. Thank you, Arif, for joining. And thank you, Sid, CS, Arif, and Jane, everyone from Team Kenya. You're welcome to stay with us in the India Dialogue. If you have some time, we'll be hearing very interesting perspectives there as well. Thank you again, Team Kenya. And sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. We will share them with the speakers and follow up as makes sense. Now we will quickly transition into our India panel. Basid, thank you, Arif. Our next panel is on India. We'll hear from three awesome speakers on how the largest democracy in the world, the land of Mahatma Gandhi, is going through the digital transformation to advance the SDGs. We talked about the working group and the study group on jobs. I was hoping we would talk about that more in the Kenya roundtable, but Sid, Matthias, I'm going to suggest we talk about that after the India roundtable because we are running late because of the tech issues and it's pretty late in India. So just so you have context why I jumped ahead on that one, and right after India, we can come back to the new study group.